Hey everybody, my name is Kat Bowser. I'm your resident fantasy therapist. Welcome back to my channel. So I know it's been a while. It's been crazy. My husband started a new job. I got sick, went to the hospital, came home. My mom got sick, went to the hospital. Holidays, it's been crazy. So I'm sorry that I haven't had videos for a little bit, but everything is semi-sorted now, so should be back to a regular schedule, I hope. So given the robe, my husband's sleeping right now, and he likes to keep an ice box in here when he's sleeping, so I'm cold, so hence the robe. So today I wanted to jump back into this by talking about my top 10 psychological tropes. And I didn't want to jump into what people traditionally consider psychological tropes. Like, I mean, if you go on tvtropes.org and stuff, and you can find a list of psychological tropes. The reason I'm not going with those is most of them are pretty bad. Like, I went through and just looked through some of them, and most of them were things like, you know, the person with dissociative identity disorder that's a murderer, or, you know, things like that. And I'm not saying you can't have that in your story, but we have those a lot. So maybe I'll talk about those at some other point. But for this video, I want to talk about my top 10 favorite tropes that have a psychological element to them, like a strong psychological element to them. So these are obviously my picks. You guys are, of course, welcome to your own. I'd actually want to hear some of your favorites if you want to drop them below. But that being said, we'll be counting down from 10 to 1, 1 being my absolute favorite. So that being said, let's just jump right into it. Number 10, manipulation. So this one I mainly like for a good villain. I really love a really good manipulative villain because emotions they're very easy to use to play somebody, and you can do this either for good or for bad. I think most of the time we think of bad when we think of manipulation, but you can also do it other ways too. Like, for instance, my nephews are very good at this. If they want something, they know how to be cute and get me to do what they want. Does it always work? No, but that's just an example of non-villainous manipulation. But I think I like this trope because it usually involves a villain who's very smart, who isn't just going to, you know, deliver the villainous monologue and get, you know, stopped by easy means. This is a villain that is likely going to turn heroes against each other, and it's not going to be an easy victory. And that's why I like it. It is, honestly, it does have potential to be an extremely dark trope. I mean, this is where you're probably going to get into like gaslighting and abusive behavior and stuff. And I think if you do that correctly, it can make for a very, very interesting story. But that being said, I do like to see both sides. Like, I like to see, you know, the good side of it too, like I kind of mentioned. And I guess I won't call it good side because you are using someone's emotions to get them to do what you want. So I guess I'll use the less villainous version of manipulation. I enjoy seeing that too, as long as it's presented correctly. And by that I mean, if you have a character who is constantly manipulating people to get what they want, and you present them as a good guy, that's a little shady to me. I don't mind occasionally though, because like I said, do I view my nephews as bad people because they do the things they do? No, I view them as children. But anyway, I've talked about this one enough. Number 9, Atonement. Okay, so this one is essentially a character who feels like they have to make up for something they did in their past, and so they are trying to do that through various different means. I like this one because I think it really opens up a chance to talk about forgiveness, and not just forgiveness from others, but self-forgiveness. And just a clue in, self-forgiveness is harder. Forgiveness from others is usually, honestly, what the atonement is about. Forgiving yourself is much more complicated, and it is much harder. Some people use atonement as a means to forgive themselves, but it's not the only thing that leads to that. So I like atonement for the character development that it gives. You know, you get to learn about a character's past, and you get to learn why they've changed their point of view. Why have they shifted on what they think? And I always find that really fascinating. I love it when characters' morals shift, or when they go through change. And that's really what atonement is it's going through a form of change. Some of my favorite characters in shows have been essentially people who are going through atonement. I talked about this in my video on The Atoner, which I go a little bit more in detail on this trope. But one of my favorite characters was from an old Disney cartoon, and he was an ex-thief. Used to be like one of the most notorious thieves on his planet. And when war came, he found himself on the side of the good guys and working with the good guys. And so he actually became the moral voice for the group, which is such a weird shift. And you see him go through the fact that he still has a draw to his old life, but because he has changed and come to care about people, it no longer gives him that thrill it used to. And that makes for really fun storytelling. Number 8, trauma recovery. I've talked about this so many times, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this one. I love it when we show the recovery process of someone who has been through trauma, because usually we don't see it. Usually there's a time skip, and then we see the person either fully recovered or mostly recovered. And I'm not saying you can't do that. I mean, I understand why movies in particular do that, but I think it is so much more interesting to actually watch the person go through a trauma recovery, because it's not a smooth process. You go forward, you go back, you go forward, you go back. And I think that needs to become more common knowledge. I mean, I work with people who have trauma, severe trauma, a lot of them. And they're always astounded when I tell them, when they've had a slide back, that that's normal, that's okay. Because they have this idea that media and society has put forth that once you start on recovery, it's a smooth path, and that's not how it works. So I like this one because you get to show the character's growth, but also their struggles. And I really think that's a good way to build on a character and make me care about a character. Number 7, the soft spot. You guys all know this one. The big, gruff, stoic man has a puppy or has a little kid that's following him around. I like this one because I'm a sucker for found family kind of things, and that's definitely what this one is. I'm also a sucker for the Papa Wolf, Mama Bear trope, and that is essentially this one. I love seeing characters that you wouldn't expect to act a certain way have something that they let their guard down around. I love to see characters who have such a bond with something that they're not afraid to let their guard down around it. Because that's really where you get to see kind of a more nuanced version, because we all have masks that we wear in certain situations. And so having a character that has either an animal or a child or whatever, sometimes it's nature, where they just let down all those masks and you see their true self. I really love that, especially when you have it in comparison to how they act normally. So I really enjoy when this pops up. I want to see it more done with women, though. I see it mostly done with men, and I do like that. But I'd like to see it done a little more with women too. I think that could be interesting. I think the obvious one that people think of is Ripley from Aliens with that, and that's true. I want a little more of that. 6, Dreamscape. Dreams are so much fun to write. I swear they're so much fun to write. So with a dreamscape, I'm talking about any form of dreams. I tend to avoid the typical, character has a dream and gets a whole ton of information from the dream. I know that's how it's done in a lot of kids shows, especially. They have a dream and, oh, here's my answer. Dreams are usually not that straightforward. I much more prefer the symbolic dreams, where if your character is struggling with something, they're not necessarily going to have a dream on exactly what they're struggling with. They're going to have a dream that's symbolic of what they're struggling with. Like, for example, people that have a lot of anxiety and a lot of fear, they don't necessarily dream about what it is that's causing them anxiety, but they may have dreams about being chased or being in a situation where they're unprepared, things like that. Dreams are very symbolic. And dreams are a lot of fun for me because your logic center here is off during dreams. So they don't have to make any damn sense, which makes them more interesting. You can be very imaginative with dreams. I love it when characters are kind of put in a dreamscape. So like they're kind of working through their dreams, because it can either be very enlightening, very frightening, fun, or any combination of all those things. So I really enjoy that. Number 5, fear. Just fear in general. I think fear is a very interesting emotion, because it could tell you a lot of things about a person. I still think that Freddy Krueger and like Pennywise are some of the scariest creatures because they are literal embodiments of fear. And it's really fun for me to see it explored with someone that you don't think about having fear, that you don't think about that they would have to, that they would fear anything, or if it's something specific they fear and you're like, really? They fear that? Again, it's a great chance to really delve into the character. I get another one. When I was a kid, one of my favorite cartoons had a big, rough military guy that was scared to death of bats. Even though they were like, these little things, and he's this big, rough man. And I always thought that was interesting. I've always been a fan of both the traditional fears and the non-traditional fears. Like, my husband is 6 foot and is scared to death of cockroaches. Just does not like them, cannot handle them. Can handle almost anything else, but not cockroaches. I'm scared to death of bees. Like, absolutely terrified of bees, can't stand them. So I think when you introduce a concept in your story that focuses on fear, you really have a good opportunity to delve into kind of what makes your characters tick. Number 4, breaking the camel's back. So this is essentially what I call the breaking point. Every character and every person has a moment where they just can't take anymore. And usually in media, it involves the person either becoming extremely protective or they have a complete breakdown. And the thing to understand here is the way we cope with situations is essentially, imagine like a 2 balance scale, like 2 sides. On the one side, you have all the stressors, hassles, and things you have to deal with. On the other side, you have all your resources, supports, coping skills that you have. So when they're balanced, you feel content generally. If you have not a lot of stressors, but a ton of resources, you can feel smothered. Like, for instance, let's say that someone is planning a wedding and they have all their plans, they have everything up to date, but they have everybody that's coming in saying, I want to help with this, I want to help with this, I want to help with this. It's very annoying and you kind of want them to leave you alone. That's because you don't have a ton of stressors, but you have too many supports right now. But then the opposite happens, where you don't have enough support and you have a ton of stressors. And that's where people generally start to have, their breakdowns, their anxiety goes up, everything. So breaking the camel's back is essentially when I think of the scale breaking. It just can't take anymore. And when we can't take anymore, we go into adrenaline mode, essentially, where it's all about, how do I get out of this situation? How do I survive? How do I get out of here? In therapy, we try to talk to people about how to notice when they're starting to get stressed out or angry, because once it gets to a certain point, your coping skills that normally work will not work anymore. Because, like I said in the Dreamscape thing, logic center here. If you're pushed into adrenaline mode, this isn't working very well. And so it's a lot harder to kind of bring yourself back down, which is why we try to teach people to catch it before it gets to that point. But in media, when it's a breaking point, I like it because it's a really good chance to show like the honest truth behind a character. Like, one of my favorites is when you have a character who has been, very calm, very collected. Everybody thinks they have all their crap together, and then they have a breaking point, and they just start spewing all this stuff, all these emotions that they've kept inside them, and it's all out in the open now. And it's a really good moment to work on those characters' relationships, because if they didn't realize this was going on, that's a great time for them to kind of reconnect, and I think that's really interesting. You also obviously have a breaking point where a character just goes full on berserk against the bad guys, and that's just plain entertaining. And honestly true, because adrenaline, fight, flight, or freeze. That's a fight. So I really think that there's a lot of room to do a lot of fun stuff with this one. Number 3, found family. I love me found family. Again, this is one of those I've talked about a lot, so I won't dwell on it for too long. I love seeing characters that form their own connections and form their own little group when they have not had, or the families they come from have been crappy. I always love seeing them make connections with other people and realize that there are people out there that can love them and care for them, and they can make their own support system. And I think that's a great message. I love seeing it happen. Almost every single book I read has this somewhere in it. Almost every single book I write will have this somewhere in it. Just because it feels good to me. I love seeing people build their lives and make better lives for themselves, and find people that care about them, even if what they came from didn't necessarily give that to them. Okay, number 2, the fallen hero. Much as I like a redemption arc, I much prefer a fallen hero arc, because I just think it's so much more interesting. Redemption, I mean, it has its place. It would probably be an honorable mention on this list. But for me, a fallen hero is more interesting, because with a redemption, you're essentially building on your morals. With a fallen hero arc, you're losing them. You're giving some up. And it takes a lot to make someone surrender their morals. Morals, especially are what I call our most important morals, we usually hold pretty tight to our chest. I mean, there's some morals that we can go back and forth on, but major morals, which are usually the ones that are involved in a fallen hero arc, are usually ones that we don't change on very much. They're a key part of our personality. So if it comes to a point where we're giving them up, what has caused that? What has led them to that point? What drove them to make that final choice? And are they gonna regret it? I think that's always fun, when they go down this dark path and they kind of see that they've started down this dark path, but they see it as, I'm a lost cause. So much room for so much psychological fun. This is character development gold. And I really wish I saw more of it. Again, I think redemption arcs are good, but I really think people they really like their redemption arcs, and I don't blame them. I mean, they're good arcs. I so much want to see more fallen hero arcs. I want to see negative character arcs, because they're interesting, and I find them significantly more interesting than a redemption arc. Number one, my absolute favorite psychological trope. Loyalty / love is the universal justifier. So what this means is essentially, no matter what horrible thing your character does, if they say that they did it because they loved someone or they were loyal to someone, it's understandable. I want to make a point clear that I'm not saying that their actions are okay. A lot of times their actions are the opposite of okay. They're horrific. But people still understand why they did it. And I really think that is an interesting point, because I think sometimes people get this idea that just because you understand someone, it means that you're okay with what they did, and that's not true. It just means that you understand why they did it. For example, this would be like, I don't want to give anything away from my story, so I'll just pull something from one of my other stories that I haven't published or may not ever publish. Character decides that in order to save his family, he has to kill a bunch of innocent people for whatever reason. And people are horrified by what he did. They are understandably angry and saddened and upset by what he did. But they understand what drove him to do it. And I just think that's fascinating. You guys have been on my channel a while, know that morals are very interesting to me. And this one is, again, playing on the morals. So that one is probably my favorite. And I love it when I see it in stories. Because like I said, I think too many people have this idea that because you understand why someone did it, you're condoning it, and that's not true. That does not necessarily have to be true. It can be true, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. So those are my top 10 favorite psychological tropes. I hope you guys have enjoyed, and I would love to hear about yours. Feel free to drop them below. If you guys don't want to miss my upload, make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you are notified whenever a new video goes up. Like I said, I'm having to rearrange my schedule a little bit, but 2 videos a week. I'll try to do one at the beginning of the week, one at the end of the week. My week kind of starts on Wednesdays now. So that being said, thank you guys for chiming in. I hope you guys will follow me for some more videos. If you guys have any suggestions or things you want me to talk about, let me know, because I'm always looking for those. And until next time, stay safe. Have a good one.